Welcome to Italics, television for the Italian American experience. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. On this episode of Italics, we have a special guest, Robert Allegrini, president of the National Italian American Foundation. For more than a decade, Allegrini served as vice president of communications, the Americas for Hilton Worldwide. Allegrini's prior positions include Assistant Vice President in charge of Public Relations for Hyatt Hotels Corporation and Director of Corporate Communications in charge of Public Relations for all Swiss hotel properties worldwide. He is the Honorary Consul for the Republic of San Marino. Let's join Robert Allegrini now. Robert, welcome to Italics. It's wonderful to have you.
Grazie. It's great to be with you.
So 5 months ago, you were appointed, signed, elected by the Board of Trustees of the National Italian American Foundation as the new president. So it's been 5 months. It's been 5 months of COVID. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
This is not your first round with NIAF. You've been with NIAF. You've been on the board since 2007, if I'm not mistaken.
My experience with NIAF goes back to the late 1980s when I was executive director of the Joint Civic Committee of Italian Americans in Chicago, which is kind of a mini NIAF in Chicago. It's the umbrella association for all the different Italian groups there. And that's when I first became aware of NIAF and the good work that it does. And then shortly thereafter, I was made an area coordinator for NIAF, and then subsequent to that, a regional vice president. Subsequent to that, elected to the board, then a board officer as executive vice president, and finally as president. So it's been a long road, but one which has been fruitful in so many ways for me.
And that's also a really good explanation of how NIAF works, because you have those different stages. It is, in fact, there is a local organization, quote unquote,
which is being rebuilt as we speak. We have just appointed a whole new series of regional vice presidents and area coordinators just to extend the reach of the foundation. Those are really our frontline leaders, so very important to the success of the foundation.
Like all other associations and organizations, these last 2 years have been, to say challenging is an understatement. The National Gala has not been held. The Spring Gala, that's about 7, 8, 10 years old in New York City, has not been held. And those are really important events, not just for people to go out and eat steak and whatever they eat, but they're two very important fundraisers for then NIAF to do its work and NIAF to offer all the assistance and scholarships and stuff.
That's correct. We tried to pivot as well as we could last year when the event was purely virtual, and we had the benefit of having Dr. Fauci as our honoree. So it was still a very successful event from the standpoint of an honoree and from a financial standpoint as well. This year, we're not quite back to where we want to be numbers wise, but we are facing the scenario where we still cannot get our Italian guests in for the gala that we just had in October. That's unfortunate, but it was still a very successful gala in so many different ways. Smaller in attendance, no smaller in spirit, for sure.
Indeed. And in fact, that has been a problem for those of us who deal with Italy. The fact that the Europeans were left out, and yet we were able to go to Europe. We were able to go to Europe.
Doesn't seem to be much reciprocity there, regrettably.
I know. And I, for example, went in September, the end of September, and found Italy to be perfectly fine. People were wearing their masks. Actually, they had, I think now we may have a better percentage rate of vaccinated people, but they were already at like 70% fully vaccinated, whereas we, in the end, were like 56% at the end of September. Yeah.
I was also there in September, and I share your opinion completely. After everything that they had gone through last year, I think they're over it as much as they can be, and trying to get back to a normal life.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm assuming that your experience, and you've been in the upper administration of Conrad Hilton, in hospitality, in the executive branch of hospitality, and I'm assuming that that's going to help you a little bit as president of NIAF, because your role as president is, can I say, more active than it's the chair person role?
The chair is the true head of the foundation, and that is an elected position. It's a volunteer position, whereas the president is the full-time paid executive. So it keeps me plenty busy. Yes, you're right. The experience that I've had in the past working for Hilton and Swissôtel and other international companies has certainly been helpful. I've always been working with Italy from a professional standpoint, so that has not changed. And the last 10 years that I was at Hilton serving as Vice President of Communications for the Americas, I supervised a virtual team spread literally around the hemisphere. So to have a team spread just around the country is even easier for me, but not something I'm unfamiliar with. So the fact that we now have NIAF team members literally from coast to coast, working from Washington on the one hand to Los Angeles on the other, it makes it easier for me, having done that for so many years in the past.
And NIAF has that rapport, that direct relationship with Italy, I know. And in fact,
we like to think that that's one of the distinguishing features between NIAF and some of the other Italian American organizations, that we are a true ponte, a bridge between Italy and the United States on so many different levels.
Exactly.
On a cultural level, on a charitable level, we have done a lot in the past to help when there have been disasters in Italy, earthquakes and floods, and then also to help with very worthwhile projects there, whether they're restorations of artworks. So we helped to restore Christopher Columbus's home in Genoa some years ago. So we do a lot with Italy.
And I will say, as someone who is a professor of Italian, I'm also delighted that you're bilingual. You speak Italian, so
più o meno.
No, you speak Italian.
Well enough to be understood by our compatriots.
Let's put it this way: you can do more than order a cafe. Let's put it that way. No, but all kidding aside, you're Italian. It's excellent, and I think that's really, important. It's not a critique at all for our other friends and colleagues who maybe are not fluent in Italian, but I just think that it makes that ponte stronger in a way. So I'm assuming you're going to be, quote unquote, commuting from Chicago to Washington, D.C.
Yes, and I'm used to it. Again, Hilton was headquartered in Washington, so it's the same flights and same hotel that I'm used to staying at for Hilton. So it works out very nicely. And in this day and age, when really, because of communications, we can be wherever we need to be. It's worked out just fine.
Talk to us a little bit about the NIAF building, because I know that for many years it was a meeting place, whatever, but the last few, about maybe 2 years before COVID hit, and perhaps NIAF didn't have the opportunity to really publicize, but you have a little museum now, right? There's a nice permanent exhibition area there that I think, if I'm not mistaken, was put up a little bit before COVID, a year or so.
You're absolutely right. We do have a lovely little museum on the first floor of the building. We were able to do that because, as I had mentioned earlier, we're now spread out across the country in terms of staff members, so there are not as many working in the headquarters as there had been in the past, which afforded us the opportunity to do something with the space, and we thought it was a good use of the space on the first floor.
Let's go back a little bit to Chicago, because you grew up in Chicago. You mentioned before you were a area coordinator and worked your way up as far as NIAF is concerned. And you mentioned the Joint Civics Committee, which is very important in Chicago. And I think that, I'm here in the Northeast, you're there in Chicago. I lived in Indiana, so I'm familiar with the Italian-American community in Chicago and how vast it is and all of the activities that go on. And I think sometimes the Northeast, let's say that Northeast corridor, right, from Boston down to DC, gets more of the attention, but things are going on in Chicago, things are going on in San Francisco, things are going on in Louisiana and so on, and so in Arizona and whatever, so on and so forth. So speak to us a little about Chicago. Let's let our audience know what's happening.
My appointment speaks to the fact that NIAF truly is a national organization that is certainly much broader than Northeast in scope, although yes, you're correct that that's where much of the leadership has come from in the past. But don't forget that it was founded, one of the founders at least, was Gino Paolucci, who is from the unlikely place of Duluth, Minnesota. And And certainly the late, great former Congressman Frank Annunzio out of Chicago was another one of the founders of the foundation. So we have had, even in our origins, a broader scope than one might think. But Chicago is certainly a hotbed of Italian-American activity. We have, as member organizations of the Joint Civic Committee, more than 50 different Italian organizations, and we are the seat also of an Italian consulate general in Chicago as well. So there is a lot of activity, and right now much of that activity is centered on recuperating our Columbus statues, which you may or may not be aware were taken literally in the middle of the night a little over a year ago under the pretext of preventing additional physical harm such as that came to some of our police officers, regrettably. They were attempting to protect one of the three Columbus statues, the one that was in Grant Park, which is the principal park in Chicago. We have a very energetic president of the Joint Civic Committee in Chicago, Ron Onesti, who is doing a wonderful job on behalf of the Joint Civic Committee trying to get those statues returned. And we had wonderful Columbus Day Parade, which I participated in proudly in October as well. So there is a lot happening in Chicago, and we welcome your viewers to come out here to Chicago and see for themselves all that's happening here.
So there are three statues in Chicago.
There are three Columbus statues. There is one in Grant Park. As I said, there was one in Grant Park. That was erected in 1933 at the time of Balbo's flight to Chicago, General Italo Balbo, which I must say was probably the proudest single day in the history of the Italian community in Chicago, because for years after being derided as, organ grinders and mafiosi, the Italian Americans in Chicago showed the rest of their co-nationals the technical prowess of Italy. And it was a flight that really, at the time, Italy was one of the only countries capable of pulling off. It was the first mass flight of seaplanes across the North Atlantic. So that one statue was erected at that time, and at the base of the statue it says that this statue has seen the wings of Italy, and it was the base of the statue to me is almost as important as the statue itself for what it says. And then we have another statue in our Little Italy just off of Taylor Street in Chicago, one of our Little Italys, because Chicago is large enough as a city to have several Little Italys, and as is typical in the U.S. and in Italy, they kind of joined forces by where they were coming from regionally. So we have a Little Italy of Tuscans, we have a Little Italy of Sicilians, a Little Italy of Calabrese. This Little Italy, the Taylor Street area, is probably the largest in the city, and as such, we had a statue there. And there are a group of proud Italian Americans who keep vigil every Sunday at the site of where that statue was, just to keep the awareness going and just to keep alive the sentiment. And then there was yet a third statue on the south side of the city, a little bit less known, but in one of the parks south of the downtown area.
From an academic point of view, intellectual academic point of view, there is, of course, now the professorship, chaired professorship at Loyola University, which is, I think it's the Anne and Paul, or the Paul and Anne Rubino Chair in Italian Studies, Italian American Studies, which is held by Professor Carla Simonini,
who is doing a wonderful job. And it's a tribute to Professor Candeloro, who I know you know well, who really obtained the necessary funding, and it's a great legacy of his that exists.
And in his own right is still grinding away from the Casa Italia.
I saw him on Columbus Day, and he was looking to be in great form, which I was happy to see.
So there's just a lot going on in Chicago, and I really think it's important for people to realize that. And I guess I should also toot Fred Gardefe's origins as well. Fred Gardefei is our distinguished professor of English and Italian American Studies here at Queens College,
who I have had the pleasure of knowing since the 1980s when he was still based here in Chicago. So yes.
Exactly. He's a Melrose boy, as he would say.
That's correct.
Suburb of Chicago.
Yes, indeed, which is one of the many pockets of Italians in Chicago. And of course, we also have the National Italian Sports Hall of Fame is headquartered in Chicago. And we have also a wonderful facility called Casa Italia, which is on an old campus of the Scalabrinian Order, which is essentially leased to the Italian community. And there we have a museum. We have the headquarters for our newspaper, which is published out of Chicago. It's actually a news magazine at this point, and a wonderful one called Fra Noi. We have also the Italian American War Veterans Museum housed out of that facility. And it's really the site of so many public events, picnics, and concerts and the like. So it's a great facility for us.
You mentioned Taylor Street, and it's unfortunate, right? Because Taylor Street was the sort of Little Italy of Chicago. And as I understand it, somewhere in the 50s, 60s, maybe?
Yes, I know where you're going, and you're absolutely right. Yes. So what transpired was it was at the time, because there was such a concentration of Italians, it was a potent political voting bloc. And the powers that be at the time really did not want to see that potent Italian political voting bloc. And so they put the University of Illinois at Chicago square in the middle of the Italian neighborhood, and forced the Italian residents to the four corners of the metropolitan area. And most of them opted at the time, as was typical in the 60s, to move to the suburbs. So we don't have, regrettably, a concentration of Italian votes within the city limits proper of Chicago any longer, which is unfortunate, or our scenario with our statues might be a little bit different right now than it is, because we don't, from an electoral standpoint, count as much as I would like to see. Certainly from an influence standpoint, I would like to think that we still do, but from a raw vote standpoint, we don't.
Back in 2008, I imagine you remember as well, when NIAF was doing the 3-day weekend. I remember, I think it was on a Friday or a Saturday, there was a panel on, in fact, the Italian American vote. I was very surprised to hear that because Italian Americans are more or less divided between Democrats, Republicans, and independents, that it wasn't a deliverable vote. And I thought that was curious. I would have thought that because there are so many independents, it might be a deliverable vote. But instead it wasn't. And what you just said reminded me of that, how important it is to have that sort of electoral strength behind you, right?
Yes. There are a couple of ways of looking at it. I would certainly like to have that electoral strength behind us, especially on issues like this. But I really also think it points to the maturity of the Italian American community, politically speaking, that, we don't vote as a monolith, that we have our own independent points of view, which I think is a healthy thing. And I think you're right, we're almost evenly divided at this point. And while that has its disadvantages for certain issues, it has its advantages in others.
I remember the late Geraldine Ferraro at one point, I'm not saying and telling any secrets, she made no secret of this, that after the 1984 election, and of course she and her husband were sort of raked over in the press for accusations of being connected to organized crime, et cetera, that she actually at one point had the opportunity to complain to the sort of Italian American community leaders here in New York. She had shared that with me, and she shared it publicly in other talks, where she sort of excoriated them, not because they didn't vote for her, but because they didn't defend her.
Yes, and well, I think she was right to do that, because we have to supersede our own political point of view when an Italian is being attacked unfairly, especially for associations with organized crime, as she was. Then it begs the defense of the entire spectrum, politically speaking, of Italian Americans, for sure.
Exactly. So passing a little bit into the political with a small p, but the diplomatic with a capital D. You're the honorary consul to San Marino.
I am. I've always been a frustrated diplomat at heart. So long ago, I think it was in the early 90s, I took a list of the countries that had diplomatic relationships with Chicago at the time, and saw that San Marino didn't have a consulate, and thought, well, My job at the time for Swiss Hotel, with whom I was working, was in public relations. So I work with travel journalists. San Marino is a country that has as one of its most important economic sectors tourism. So I thought I could help elevate the profile of the country. So I started a campaign that was only successful 20 years later, but nothing pays off like persistence. So I am indeed the honorary consul of what is the oldest country in the world, dating back to 301 AD, the Republic of San Marino, which is a shining example of democracy. They've had the same form of government, the captain's regent, which is an interesting form of government going back, I believe, to the 1400s. They have these two co-heads of state that are called the captain's regent. They must come from opposing political parties so that they can compromise with one another while they are heads of state. And they're only in office for 6 months. So every 6 months, they cycle through two new captain's regents. So it is a country built on a lot of consensus, which I think we can all agree is something we could use more of here in the United States these days.
Indeed.
So I'm very proud to serve, and it is the sister republic of Italy. It's got a fascinating history as to why it's not a part of Italy, but certainly its population is Italic in the sense of its culture. It just has a different history, not unlike the United States and Canada having similar cultures but different histories.
So I'm assuming that in the future, we will see more San Marinesi at NIAF, perhaps.
Well, there's only a limited number of San Marinesi in the country, but I'll find the ones I can, for sure.
Very good. So let's just sort of get back to NIAF. And I say NIAF, some people say NIAF, NIAF.
I go back and forth. I try to say NIAF with the Americans, NIAF with the Italians, but we've never settled that debate definitively.
Exactly. Well, hopefully we're coming out of COVID. The first attempt at the in-person gala just took place. It had to be done, of course, minimally.
We had to get a smaller footprint and have more space, and we sold out about 2 weeks ago. We're Italian, and look, I'm talking my head. We're Italian. We want to get together. We want to see our friends. This is like a family wedding every year.
First time in 2 years, here we are all together.
It's a little bit of the renaissance of NIAF tonight. Here it is. It's been a long time coming, but we're very happy to have 450 guests here. It wasn't easy, but we made it happen.
It's been a while. It has, because you are the idea behind, you're basically the moving motor, the spirit, etc., behind the NIAF Spring Gala, which unfortunately we haven't had in 2 years.
But we're going to have one in 2022, April 22nd, 2022. And we're really, really excited about it. And this is going to be just special, really, this April.
Nessuno, ti giuro, nessuno, nemmeno il destino ci può separare, perché questo amore che il cielo ci dà sempre vivrà.
Are we hopeful for 2022?
Absolutely. We're going to be full speed ahead for our New York gala. And we hope to have several other regional galas next year as well. We have one on the books already for Phoenix in March, and then hopefully one in Boston in August, just prior to the big festival that they have there every year in Boston. So we're literally trying to spread across the country. We just had a wonderful dinner in Chicago, celebrating our new consul general in Chicago. So we are spreading our wings, as we should, to be a true national organization. And one of the other things that I hope that you will see much more of soon is an expanded grant program, because I think grants are critical. As an ethnic group, I sometimes am critical of our efforts to transmit the full richness of our heritage to the next generation. And what I say is, we've done a great job. The nonne of the current generation of Italian Americans have done a great job of transmitting their recipes and their prayers, but not much else. And there's nothing wrong. We should all take pride that we have, in my opinion, the world's greatest cuisine, and we should all take pride that the Mother Church has been based in the Italic Peninsula for almost 2 millennia. But there's so much more to our culture than the kitchen and the church. And we need to be imparting that as much as we can into the next generation. Because if we don't, it's filled by a void that the media takes over, and it's a media that continues to be fixated on, for some reason, portraying Italians as either buffoons or mafiosi, neither of which we are. The more that we can fill that void by showing the richness of our heritage and the fullness of our heritage, I think the better off we are as an ethnic group. So I want to see more grants going to filmmakers, to website developers, to authors, all of whom I think have a key role in transmitting our heritage and our culture to the next generation, which is, of course, key. So that is high on my agenda at the foundation. And also high on the agenda is really to maintain the links with Italy. I participated this past Columbus Day on 2 panels via Zoom, of course, one in Genoa and one in Rome, talking about Columbus. And that is really what we should be doing as the foundation, is making our presence felt in Italy, not just on the issue of Columbus, but on all the issues of importance, of common importance to Italy and to the Italian American community.
Well, what can I say? That's music to my ears, because I remember in the late 90s and early 2000s, NIAF had a grant program that was very beneficial to young writers and filmmakers. And I remember being on that committee, working with some of your past colleagues. And I just think it's wonderful. And I can tell you that we at the Calander Institute have made our own connections to Italy, especially with the Scholars of American Studies in Italy. I was going to say Italian Americanists, but then that wouldn't give the right, the precise message. But the professors of American Studies in Italy, we've hooked up with them. We've been involved with them since about 2015, and they just love the idea of exploring Italian Americana, and it's growing more and more, and it's just wonderful. Well, listen, I want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy day, week.
I really appreciate you affording me this opportunity to share with your viewers some of my thoughts for the future of the foundation. And as I say, we have comparable missions. So I hope your viewers and your members will consider supporting the foundation as well. And we certainly will consider and should support the good works of your institute.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Italics. I'm Anthony Tamburri. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata.